Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Kristen Stevens-Martinez, and I will be the technology facilitator for the session. Please let me know if you have any questions or difficulties. This is the Learning Analytics and Data Visualizations Broadening Our View session, which is an expertise connection section. It was designed to have leaders in the Circles community with expertise in the topic to share information and examples with participants who want to learn more about the topic, and also provide a forum for participants to discuss how they might incorporate the topic into their work. And as well, to help broker connections between community members around a topic. And as we go through the session, I hope you get a chance to learn and think about what to take to the strategy sessions tomorrow, where we start to make plans for how we can remake broadening. And I'm going to turn it over to our main leaders for this session, and I'll be the one clicking the button for what's next with Cynthia, Chad, and Tiffany.
Great, thank you, Kristen. Yeah, we're really happy you're all here, and this will be a very discussion-focused session. So hopefully you're ready to talk about some things with the other people here. So let's go to the next slide. Talk a little bit about the structure for today. So we have a little less than an hour with you guys. So first, we'll just do really quick introductions of three of the co-organizers here, and then we have the majority of the time today focused around three different themes or questions we want everyone to kind of think about and talk about. So we'll go through them one at a time, and we'll do breakout rooms, so kind of a fewer people to talk to, and have hopefully some other discussions. With each of those breakout questions, there's a Padlet to go with it, so you can take notes there and add some thoughts. And then after each of those breakouts, we'll come back as a group and talk about those. So each of those questions will be about 10-minute breakout, and then like a 5-minute whole group wrap up for each of those. And then we'll have more time at the end to kind of talk across the different questions and talk about any other kinds of issues that might have come up within your small groups. And we'll randomize the groups each time, so we'll be talking to different people during each of the breakouts. That's the plan. And let's just move on to the introductions, I guess. Next slide. All right, so hello, I'm Cynthia D'Angelo. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I do a lot of different work on things related to learning analytics, data visualization, mostly around different kinds of advanced technologies in classroom spaces. So things like simulations and games for learning and other things like that. I have a current NSF project, it's that first one there. That is a methodology project in the ECR program. We're really trying to think about ways to combine sort of grounded qualitative theory approaches along with computational approaches to help provide new tools and different kinds of perspectives for researchers. Then I've also done a lot of work around audio-based analytics, either with collaboration in small group like that project that's mentioned there, as well as other related things. There's my email and my Twitter. I also will kind of mention some resources at the end as well. I've written a series of blog posts on R and how to kind of get started if you're new to R. I do think that, as I'll probably mention a few times today, R and RStudio are kind of a really important way to kind of take power and control over your analysis and data and things like that. And I think that's a good way for you to go. So if you're new to R, I have a bunch of resources on my website that could be helpful, perhaps. All right, we'll go next slide to Chad.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Cynthia. I'm Chad Dorsey. I'm the president and CEO of the Concord Consortium in Concord, Massachusetts, and also in the Bay Area in California. We're a nonprofit focused on thinking about transforming STEM education through technology, and I'll have a wide variety of NSF projects. I'm on a few of them, one called Inquiry Space that's thinking about analytics, data analysis, and experimentation in high school science education, a number of collaborative mathematics learning projects that are looking at learning analytics and how it can inform that work, as well as some new projects that are thinking about data environments for elementary science inquiry. But really across our work, we're frequently thinking about how learning analytics can inform us about student learning and thinking about broadening participation within that. Both my email address and Concord's, mine and Twitter, or my Twitter and Concord's Twitter are there as well. And move on to Tiffany.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here today. I am happy to be having funding for several related NSF projects looking at learning analytics within educational environments. I've looked at some educational games and tried to use learning analytics to try to improve performance. I also build automatic hints for programming education. I've been doing some research on positive feedback sent from instructors to computer science students to improve their retention, and also working with the local middle school in a research practice partnership for integrating computer science and CT in middle schools. I didn't write on this list, but I am also the co-PI for an NSF Broadening Participation in Computing Alliance called the STARS Computing Core, and we just received a renewal for that. And that project is focused on getting college students and faculty involved in broadening participation in access to computer science education. And we've actually been applying quite a bit of analytics to our data sets to try to understand the impact of that program. And I think there's definitely some great questions in how we can leverage analytics for equity and for diversity and inclusion. And I look forward to our discussion today. Next slide.
Okay, great. So that's a little bit about us. And so we're just going to get started with the first question. So first of all, there's a couple links. That link that Tiffany put into the chat, that's a link to all these slides, and although the links are in there as well, but also I'll put in this link. So this first link is for the Padlet for question 1. Both those are the same link. And so we're going to go, I think we'll do 3 breakout rooms. And then that'll work. Okay, well, like 3 to 4 people in a group. And each of the 3 of us will each be in one of the groups, and then we'll come back and chat together about that. So again, please put your comments and things in the Padlet, the Scribe. So I'll be kind of facilitating the discussion afterwards, and Chad will be trying to summarize the Padlet as we're going through and create a summary slide that we'll have as well. And you'll have access to these after the session. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to set this for 10 minutes. And okay, great. So here we go. See you guys in a bit. All right, is everybody back?
I believe everyone is back, yes.
Okay, great. Hello, welcome back. That was a fast 10 minutes. So yeah, I think based on what I see in the Padlet, I think everyone had good conversations. I think one of the things we talked about that I hadn't kind of thought about ahead of time was this issue about agency and thinking about students and how much choice they have and like how and when data is being collected, and going beyond just the consent sort of issues. So I had a previous project I mentioned sort of with some audio data we were collecting, and so they were using these headset microphones and to get good audio quality. And we had this with middle school students and with college students. Actually, college students much worse about doing this, but at some points the students could like take off the headset microphone, in which case we wouldn't be getting good data anymore. We would make a little note and like we didn't really use it anymore. It really made me think about like how being able to give students ways of choosing whether or not they're able to, if they want to provide data for something. I mean, obviously they're in a consent to something, but maybe they just want to take a 2-minute break and they just don't want you to have their data for whatever reason for a couple minutes. But the other thing too that kind of came up that was nice was that it also signaled to the students, like when they put the headsets on, it was like, okay, time to put on your collaboration headsets. And they kind of like were cued into knowing like now they're going to be collaborating, doing this collaborative activity with their other students. And it really kind of would get them into the right kind of context and space to do that, which was kind of a nice sort of physical reminder, A, that we were collecting their data, and B, that like what the activity they were supposed to be focusing on, which was really nice. So so I thought that was kind of a good example. I think one of the things also we mentioned was thinking about auditing your kind of processes and choices that you make, that maybe, we've done a lot of different data collection, all of us, and sometimes you just kind of start doing things you don't necessarily understand why, or have like maybe fully just kind of thought about all of the different implicit choices and assumptions you're making when you're doing all those things. We make a lot of choices when we're collecting data, and not all of them are kind of fully explicit. And so that's sort of an important thing to do, I think, in terms of like who is part of your participant pool, how you're collecting their data, what data are not being collected, things like that. All right, are there any other the other groups that want to kind of report out any big things they talked about, anything important? Anyone from group 1 or group 2?
Well, I wanted
we
to
talked-
mention, oh, so go ahead.
But no, you should go.
I was just going to say, I actually stuck on the Padlet just as an example. Don't collect data you don't plan to analyze, but at the same time, sometimes we don't know what we might want to analyze with regard to equity and diversity and inclusion. So, but I think it's actually sort of too late for us to make excuses and not be thinking about that. So we need to actually think about how can we understand how our technologies and learning analytics and data visualizations, how are they impacting people from different demographic groups? So we need to plan for that.
And our group talked a little bit about the complication of survey questions and the ambiguities that might be involved in them. So you sometimes think you're collecting data, but you might be causing somebody confusion, and there are other times when they're maybe not willing to participate, and so the recognition that there are sort of implicit inclusion and exclusion moments that don't always get recognized.
Yeah. Okay, should we move on to question 2?
Sure, that would be me.
All right.
All right, so before we hop into breakout rooms, our question 2 is our data interpretation and equity. So our question we formulated was, how do we build understanding and awareness of our data, what might be missing, and how it interacts with issues of equity and diversity and inclusion? And I wanted to just give a little story from my own research from 10 years ago. We were looking at data from an intelligent tutoring system, and we had added hints into the system, automated hints, and we were finding out that many students were dropping out of the tutor, and especially students who didn't use hints. And when I looked at the data, so my initial thought was that students who were dropping out maybe got frustrated or gave up early because they didn't have help when they needed it. But then when I looked at it, I realized that actually all the students, even if they didn't have hints, they were all spending like 2 or more hours on the tutor, and it was supposed to be a homework assignment. So that seems like a reasonable amount of time for students to spend. And even for myself, I learned that I may have assumptions about what's going on with students or what might be explaining behavior of students. And there are a lot of other things going on in people's lives, and there are intersections of identities that have different kinds of life impacts for people. So I think we should think about what other explanations might there be for our data. So rather than thinking, oh, students aren't trying hard, we should think about what might be access issues or equity issues or socioeconomic status issues or ability issues or race issues or gender issues that might be causing more burdens for our students or might be causing the kinds of things that we're seeing. So just with that as a sort of prompt for reflection, let's go to our breakout rooms and think about what can we do to think about our data and what other explanations there might be for things that we're seeing, and what data we might want to think about collecting that would help us understand those better. So let's set those up.
Breakout rooms 2, here we go.
Thanks. Let's take a look at the Padlet, or were we able to summarize on our slides? Let's see if we've got a summary or if we should use let's just use the Padlet. So in our room, we talked about that there's different ways to collect data than just formal surveys. And we can do things like give agency in the data collection process, or we can use tools that the current generations are more comfortable with, or do things like having group discussions and sort of polls for a group of people, and to show change before and after an intervention. So rather than everybody has all their demographic information tied to each of their responses, you can get a whole group and get a whole group change so that people don't feel so nervous about sharing their data. We talked about the fact that different groups, different demographic groups of data might be less likely to share data. And then we also started talking a little bit about tools. I think some other groups may have talked about that too. One thing we said about tools is that there aren't very many tools, especially like for professors or teachers, to look at the data that's coming out from their students, and then we may be losing opportunities to come up with interventions or to help our students. Would anyone like to sort of present any ideas from their breakout?
Yeah, we talked about tools a little bit in ours. I think one of the things I like to to emphasize to people is, like, if you're not making the choices with the tool that you have, like if your tool does not allow you to make a lot of choices, then that tool is making choices for you. And so that's probably not going to work out very well for you. So I, again, try to get people to use R, because you can do things the way you want to do them that's right for your data. It gives you a lot of freedom and agency in how you do those things. And so again, it's important so that you have the power to do that, and not ceding that power to the person who designed whatever Excel spreadsheet you're using or something.
Looks like we're getting more comments on the Padlet. Would another group like to talk about what they discussed? So there's a couple of things about the right tools. I think I've personally done research, like trying to get data from Moodle and from like homework assignment spaces and from programming environments, and like putting them all into the same dashboard. That's a project that we're doing here at NC State, and it takes quite a lot of effort to get all the data out into something that we're trying to provide to instructors. And so I think we actually also need a lot more help, just like figuring out what can we do with the data, like, importing everything into R, like even getting everything into the same database and aligning all the times, like all of that is a big challenge.
Yep.
Our group talked interestingly at the beginning about some of the ways that diversity of perspective can be important in creating awareness of your blind spots when you're looking at data. Why are people doing certain things? How do you interpret something? You're only looking through the lens that you have when you're the one looking at it or thinking about the ways to interpret it. So bringing in a diverse set of perspectives to help jostle you into new ways of looking at data itself is important.
Does anybody want to add anything, or shall we move to our third question?
I think I just want to highlight one of Veronica's things that she put on there about respecting participants. That's like the first step. That's really, really important. I really like that. It's not our data, it's their data they're sharing with us, and we need to respect that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I think Chad's gonna talk about question 3.
Yes, so question 3 brings this home to thinking about, we've talked about collecting data and the choices that we're making in collecting it. We talked about how we become aware of the data that we have and the stories that they tell. And this one takes it to the natural end of, once we have data, there are systems that make choices about and with those data. You might have a dashboard that people use to make decisions. You might be making recommendations based upon the data that you have. So this is our chance to, within the frame of diversity, equity, and inclusion, think about the implications for the systems that we're and the choices that we're making around data. So we'll take, again, 10 minutes to think about that together, and then come back. The Padlet link is once again on the slide, and we'll see you soon.
All
right, I think we're all back. So let me share my screen again so we can all see what everyone did. There we go.
Great, and we'll be fast about this because we're just about up to the time, and there are a couple links people might want to say something about. In our group, we talked at the end about questions around, we're queuing off of the note on customization, and trying to figure out how you balance the tension between giving people all the control they need and letting them create things that obfuscate. And we talked about trying to bring in interesting sets of perspectives that might be providing enough reflection of diversity that you can bring expertise to something so that you're still providing ways for people to look at or understand things through a lens that's useful, but not doing it, by only bringing your perspective to bear as a designer. What did other people come up with in their groups?
In our group, we were talking about, systems like gray books making us maybe sort of act a certain way. And maybe we could think about actually using the systems to humanize how we interact with learners, like giving different kinds of deadlines, like an early, an exact deadline and a late deadline, like to give people chances to do their work and not necessarily sort of judge them that they're not, you just get a 0 if you don't do things the way the system wants.
We got off on a bit of a tangent, but we did talk a little bit about like thinking about, like, if let's say you're doing something for some kind of school-based system, it's for a teacher, like think about like, what if the principal got a hold of this, or the district people, and tried to use it for evaluation or something it wasn't really meant to do, like trying to think about that ahead of time. So there might be ways to design around that wouldn't be as useful for those other purposes that are not what you intend, but it's going to be, it's hard.
That's great. Well, should we take the last minute and make sure that we get to the resources for people so we can give them some context?
Yeah. So yeah, if this stuff is interesting to you, this book is very good. It came out about 1.5 years ago. I highly recommend it. It's also really pretty. There's lots of data visualizations in it, but a really good discussion of a lot of these kinds of related issues. So.
And it's available free online, although not
Yes.
nearly as pretty as the book. But,
that link does have a full version of the book, but yeah, it's a very nice book. So you should also purchase it. If you can.
The last page of our slides has some more books that were from the 3C Fellows program that Nikki Washington led, along with Chandra Daly and Cecily Sadler. I was part of that program, and I read most of these books, and a lot of them talk about things related to data, but especially the Invisible Women book. And I'm sure that the one that Cynthia recommended is also good.
All right, it's 4 o'clock. Thanks for coming, guys. Let us know if you have questions. We'd be happy to follow up later with anyone. These slides, will be available if you want to refer back to them later, and have a good rest of the meeting.
Thanks
coming.
for the button pushing.
Yeah. So first off, thank you for a productive, engaging session. I hope people had a good time. And I just wanted to do a couple of things. One is to say that the welcome and announcement session that kind of got lost due to technical difficulty, that is now going to happen basically now. So we probably should go back to Swap Card, and you can look in the agenda and you can find the announcements and welcome kind of at the end of today. And then tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific or 1 p.m. Eastern, there's going to be another day of interactive sessions, starting with a morning welcome and a couple of important short talks from NSF leaders, and there'll be the gallery walk. So just wanted to remind you of that. Let's see, if you haven't already, use Swap Card tonight to go up to check out the posters and demos in the gallery and sign up for sessions you want to attend. And while you were there, check out everything we have scheduled tomorrow. And there's an optional after hours gathering in Wonder, which will start at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 3:30 Pacific time. And it's going to run for 1.5 hours, and it's totally informal. So you can just drop by whenever you want to stay, whenever you want to, and say hi to the other participants. And it's a little bit different than Zoom or Swap Card, but it might be fun to check out. I'm intrigued. I have not tried Wonder. I've tried many of the different apps. So I'm intrigued to see what this looks like.
I can vouch. I tried it for the first time at the IISE meeting, and it's actually pretty nice. It's very interesting, and it captures a lot of the dynamics that social interactions and wandering in groups captures.
Yeah, so I'm intrigued to at least check it out. I'll probably have at least one child in my lap, maybe 2, because that is what ends up happening after 5 p.m. And then otherwise, hopefully you'll come back to Swap Card tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific or 1 p.m. Eastern.